Hello, world, and welcome, Matt Claw. Hope I'm probably butchering your name.
Matt Cloister.
Yeah, somebody already commented before we were even live. I didn't even know you could do that.
Yeah, well, this says this chat on the side, and then the awesome thumbnail that we picked.
Thanks for that one.
You're welcome.
Really glad about that thumbnail. Hey, look at that.
Yeah.
Oh, no, maybe not.
Oh yeah. Now you actually have to hit play,
actually.
and now we can see ourselves. That's pretty cool. Welcome to today's live stream. It's going to be a fun one. If you haven't tuned in to a previous live stream, we do these every single Sunday at 8:45 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And today we're talking about things like how consistent base malts are or are not. We're talking about things like just something about starting a brewery if you're planning on doing that in the near future.
It's things to think about as you go down that pathway.
Yeah. But first, I guess we should go ahead and start in talking about some Genus news. What happened this last week?
Well, we did film our Willet Beer number 5 already. God, that series is just like flying by.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it was yesterday. We're like, hey, let's do a side-by-side with random ingredients. And so filmed our next one where it's going to be, I think, our best one yet, actually, too. Because we had 2 guest brewers brewing for this round with Chad White as well, which is a locally renowned chef around here that actually picks some pretty crazy ingredients to have the brewers work with. So
yeah, and that's kind of a fun idea that we've been kind of trying to build out, reach out to more brewers in the area, because we have just in the greater area around us probably 30 to 40 breweries, depending on where you kind of draw that circumference. There's a lot around there. But so that's super fun. 2 breweries going head to head, and then also a locally. Actually, he's a James Beard semifinalist now.
Somebody says there's a bit of an echo. Is there something weird going on?
A bit of an echo. It shouldn't be through the camera, so it must just be the reverb from the room thing.
I was gonna say a room might be a little echoey.
Yeah.
But
let me know if it's too bad, and we can do some adjustments on the soundboard.
Did you say we got a PPE? PPP? PP?
Yeah. PPPPP.
I am approved to go PPP. No, that is, what does it stand for?
Payroll Protection Program.
Payroll Protection Program. So we're not going to go out of business, which is a good thing. It means we got some money to back up the fact that we are not making any for the last couple months now.
Yeah, and that also means that we can go ahead and bring back our furloughed employees, which means we can have a little bit more help, hopefully spread the workload a little bit more right now and get slightly more sleep. That'd be nice.
Yep. Or at least, be able to pay ourselves and still work.
Yeah.
That helps too. Yeah.
That is a
working without paying yourself isn't as fun.
It's not that we hate our jobs, it's just that we don't want to do it for free.
Somebody says the echo is like a phaser effect.
Badass phaser effect.
Is there something weird with the microphones?
No, it's not the microphones. It's actually probably I think Ryan set our effect boards to a different whatever it's called. Different number that I normally have it on.
All right, you go check that out real fast. And I will continue talking about what was I on? Oh yeah, not making money. Somebody's got a quick question too. Why Peter takes care of that about the Jello in our glasses on our last. When was that? Oh, I think that was actually. Yes, that was on our last Willet Beer challenge, and yes, the Jello was set in the glass. Previously to pouring the beer into the glass, so it was set in the bottom of the glass. Hey, somebody says no echo. I don't know. Now there's an echo? It might have been the one person's computer too. Somebody's saying hi from Ireland. Nice. Carrie, that's my dad's name. That's pretty cool too. All right, Peter, stop screwing with it. Come back. Peter can hear it. Very slight reverb. Is it? It's from stuff from the mics. I'm pretty sure I got those guys in there good. All right. Well, I will continue on then to keep everybody's interest. So we talked about PPE, getting some money. Also, what we'll be doing actually shortly after making this live stream is we will be heading down to the Incubator Brew House and doing a deep clean down there. And I don't know, why don't you guys, for all those that are tuned in right now, throw a comment and let me know if you actually were considering doing a video on that, sort of a behind the scenes life of a brewer when it comes to trying to keep breweries, brew houses clean and maintained. We plan on doing a bunch of different caustic and acid cycles on things, maintaining some elements on the hot liquor tank down there, and just overall cleanliness. I think I heard there might have been a mouse or two that we'll have to take care of.
Yeah, so we're bringing a shotgun down there.
You don't even have a shotgun.
That's true, I don't. Hey, Walmart's nearby, though.
I could have brought my 6-gauge shotgun.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, it's about this big.
Just start chipping away at the foundation of the building. That sounds super smart.
That's a joke. Those don't exist. At least I don't think they do.
I don't know. I know zero about guns.
Yep, sounds about right. Okay, so deep cleaning brew houses and
Yeah, so we're gonna maybe even be taking apart the auger on the grain mill. Make sure that we get in there and get a deep clean because it probably needs some love at this point.
Yeah, clean out that grain auger. That was just a terrible design down there.
Yeah, it's really not the efficient way to send grain into a mash tun, but.
Downside to a lot of augers actually is that they tend to sit directly above the mash tun, which means you get nice steamy fumes that go back up into lots of grain dust, which, as you know, will make lots and lots of moldiness. Yeah,
sugars and water in warm areas doesn't make for a very clean, consistent brew house.
Gotcha. All right. Other news: Washington State is finally starting to roll back our COVID-19 restrictions. I guess is what you would call those.
Yeah. So we've been set out with a 3-stage, 4-stage plan, and each incremental stage they're opening up the state a little bit more. In Spokane, specifically on this side of the mountains where we're far less populated and lower population density, there's been a little bit of a controversy because a lot of business owners in Spokane are fighting to try to reopen on a faster timeline than the metropolis over on the other side of mountains, which is the Seattle area.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to the fact that our actual infection rate numbers are stupidly low compared to the other side of the state where they have much higher population. So it's kind of one of those things where people are like, hey, what's the deal here?
Yeah, so we'll see, we'll follow that along and see how it goes. I certainly wouldn't mind being able to open at a slightly faster pace than they currently have us slated for.
Well, it's funny too, because they have this phase program, but they don't actually give us actual dates to work with on this either. They're just kind of arbitrary stuff, which is very frustrating as a business when you're trying to plan ahead for things.
We'll check in every 3 weeks or so and see if it's time to do next phase.
Yeah, I think last I heard it's the end of the month is what they're saying, but they were saying that for last month too, so I'm just kind of crossing my fingers and hope at some point they just say, go do business again.
Yeah. So that's the news in our state. No, I know it's going to be different everywhere. There's definitely some of you that are in very low population density areas that didn't really get hit, and your state might already be open. And some of you that are probably in higher population density areas or areas that are hit really, really hard that are like, oh, that sounds like not a good idea, which I completely understand both sides. Are we? Is the echo off, everyone, by the way? Let's check in on that while we go on to our... Beer of the week, bum, bum, bum. Beer of the week, yeah.
All right. It is, Peter,
a wheat wine. Wheat wine is like barley wine, but it obviously is made out of wheat. That's not the only distinction. It actually has some slightly different flavors that you are aiming for in a wheat wine, though.
So I'm not even aware of this. Did you you looked this up in BJCP? So Peter did all the research for our beer of the week this week for everyone's information, and he told me about that just this morning, and I was like, did you just make that up, or is that actually a BJCP category? And he apparently said it is a BJCP category.
22D.
There you go, wheat wine. So just like the name implies, obviously a big boozy beer, essentially a barley wine, but brewed with lots of wheat.
Yeah, and so the biggest difference between a wheat wine and a barley wine is barley wines are usually leaning into some malt and maybe some yeast fruitiness, or not fruitiness, but sweetness. But in a wheat wine, you're actually leaning into some more fruitiness that can come from the malt. It's some softer, maybe some floral complexity, and they're just meant to not quite be as heavy. Think of all the subtle florally characters you can get out of honey, for example. That's kind of the same theme that you're looking for in a wheat wine.
So wheat wine are going to have wheat, but also potentially some adjuncts in there?
Yeah, exactly. So which is, that's going to go into our malt of the week. But the wheat is going to be at least 50% in a wheat wine. That's kind of what makes most wheat beers. You're aiming for that 50+% wheat. And the rest is going to be barley, but it can be, you can get a little bit of darkness in it. That said, the darkest end of the spectrum, I think, is 15... 15 SRM for this beer, so it's not terribly dark. It can get into that like medium amber range.
Yeah, which is typical of a barley wine, just because of or a wheat wine, I guess you could say in this case, just because of the sheer amount of grains. Because what are we shooting for gravity wise on here?
Original gravity of 1.080 to 1.12, which is that's a pretty wide range and a pretty robust starting gravity on that top end.
Yep, with looks like pretty high FGs as well, 1016 to 1030. So yeah, right in that same range as what you would think of as
Hi, Dennis.
Any kind of barley wine. Is going to fall into that same range, which means that you're just going to be using a butt ton of grains for a 5-gallon batch. You're probably looking at anywhere from about 18 to 25 pounds of grains.
Yeah.
So that's going to give you those slightly darker colors than you might be used to. Speaking about darker colors and more robust malts.
We malt of the week. Use those words properly.
Wow, that was quite the transition there.
Yeah, the malt of the week is dark wheat. Dark wheat. Oh wow, I'm just hitting here. We just like to elbow each other.
Hey, I didn't spill it on my crotch today though.
That is a win.
Winning.
Yeah, at least this time we don't have like a table that you can see through, so everyone doesn't think you peed your pants.
Also, happy Mother's Day, everyone.
Yeah.
I totally told my wife this morning.
My wife's probably watching. Happy Mother's Day, wife. Nailed it. Anyways, dark wheat. Dark wheat is the Munich of wheat malts.
So bad.
And the nice thing.
Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, thanks. We're gonna bring our kids in later, and then just we'll co-mother. If you like shenanigans, by the way, hit the like button, because only one person's liked this video so far. That makes me sad in my heart. Dark wheat. Dark wheat is the Munich of the wheat malt, of the wheat world. And the thing that differentiates dark wheat from like barley-based Munich is it actually has some of those softer floral and fruity notes in the malt itself.
I don't think your wife is watching right now, by the way, because she just drove
Oh, dang it.
by. I'm like, speaking of your wife.
Usually she watches. Just as a
Sorry, we are getting very sidetracked right now. So it's going to have a more robust flavor than your typical white wheat, even more so than even a red wheat, which can have a little higher protein content and give you a little more chewiness. Push through some of those fruity notes. With that said, the higher alcohol will also build on those fruity notes, which means that you do want to be a little bit more restrained on your selection of hops. Which leads us to our hop of the week, which is going to be the classic Nugget.
And contrary to popular belief, this isn't just a lump of marijuana.
Okay. Continuing on. Nugget is actually another Oregon State hop, which was, what was another one we just did recently that came out of Oregon State?
It was one of the old school ones, like Cascade or Brewer's Gold or something like that.
Yeah, no, and
a lot of the original hops actually came out of Oregon State. It might have even been like Chinook or something.
Yeah, Oregon State is actually a pretty, I think it's the largest breeding program, at least in the U.S., or at least the oldest breeding program in the U.S. So Nugget was originally bred in the 70s. I can't remember exactly. I know it had a lot of Brewer's Gold in it, but it is what you would call an all-American mutt of a hop. It had like 5 different varieties that went into creating the hop. It is the mother of Millennium, I also found out.
Nice, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's a sister of Galena too, I think. So between Nugget and Galena, they were the first 2 super alphas.
One of these days, somebody's just got to create like a family tree of hops, like
oh hell yeah, like that sounds amazing.
Or what's it called in mythology when they do that? At the beginning of any like mythology book, they've got the whole family lineage.
Oh yeah, something like that.
So that'd be awesome. So if any of you guys are down for a project and want to share it with us, I don't know if we have time to put that together, but
so anyway, yeah. So Nugget was bred to sort of actually, what was it used for now originally? It's been adopted by a lot of German brewers, but it was bred and became popular in the 80s during the 80s hop shortage. It actually took up like 15% of the total crop yield, which was impressive. Yeah, compared to like 3% today, I believe is all it holds. And so yeah. Anyway, but in modern beers today, it's generally used as a nice clean bittering hop, but it's also used to balance out some of the newer world big tropical fruit hops because it really has an herbal quality that dominates it. And I think that's really the best way to take advantage of Nugget, especially in something like a wheat wine that's going to have some fruitiness from the malt, that's going to have some fruitiness from the fermentation, and so having that herbal balance, having that kind of clean, sharp bitterness as well can really have a nice balancing impact. One thing I also noticed using Nugget in the past is that it can have some underlying kind of sweeter notes. I've gotten even like some kind of like cherry notes out of it. People say like lychee fruit. And a little bit kind of on that sweeter side.
I've definitely gotten that in a lot of the beers that I use it in. So instead of being like a really aggressive or herbal like kind of quality that you get off of something like Saaz, where it's like this zing, this pop on the top of the beer, Nugget has the same herbal quality but with some soft underlying sweetness or maybe even almost fruitiness that kind of blends everything together. So
yeah, mid-range for your alphas. Generally, you're going to be looking at right around 10-ish, 10, 12, depending on the crop year and where it's coming from. So, but yeah, good old Nugget. It is very underutilized these days and works really well, especially in beers that need that balance to them. I think that you choosing this hop for the week is a great one.
Yeah. So speaking of hops, just in general. In the wheat wine category, you're generally aiming for that 30 to 60 IBU. So in the just burped, nice. In the light pale ale to like almost light IPA kind of range in terms of overall hoppiness, but of course this is going to be a well-aged beer, and so that age is going to kind of mellow out that and turn into probably lean into more of the fruitiness of the hops.
Sorry, I'm laughing. People are commenting on my hair.
Yeah, what does Logan use on his hair? Really, he just uses raw estrogen.
Yeah. No, I actually I have a stockpile of chia pet seeds. I sprinkle them on my hair every morning and give them a little water.
Yeah. I help him water every morning.
Chia.
And then we do actually take gardening shears whenever we take the hair back off.
Yeah, I do have to get sheared about it once a month.
Yeah. Fun fact is it is edible. So it works kind of similar like wheatgrass or anything like that, where you actually will get some health benefits.
Quarantine, people. Quarantine.
All
right. Well, let's go on to our yeast of the week to finish up this wheat wine. And I believe we used this once before, but we chose the Yeast 1332.
Which is Northwest Ale. I believe that's the Hales strain. It's either Hales or Georgetown, I forget. But it's a phenomenal yeast because it works a lot like a British yeast, but it is a strong fermenter, so it can accentuate some hoppiness if you put it in an IPA. But overall, it's just a really strong fermenting, relatively neutral but subtly fruity British style yeast that just happens to be in the northwest of America.
Yeah, I think ultimately why you would choose this strain over something like the Chico strain or something like the American Ale 2 strain or Independence, is the fact that it's going to really push through that maltiness. And that's what a wheat wine is going to be about. You want the wheat character to shine through. And this strain, we've used it for sort of like American browns. We've used it for even amber ales, and pushing through that malt profile and really letting it shine is what this strain is designed for. So that is why we chose the Northwest Ale from Yeast to be the beer,
to be the
week.
Yeast of the beer. To be the yeast of the beer. And that is it for our beer of the week. Bow wow wow. Did that jingle by myself, and it was really good because I'm awesome at singing. Moving on.
It's like, I'm just going now. All right, so Peter's first topic of the week is addressing the question of. We've done some videos on the past on this.
Yeah.
And that is talking about base malts and consistencies. And I think as a home brewer, most people just assume that base malts are consistent and they're getting the same thing every single time. When the reality is that's often not the case, especially when it comes from smaller, more local maltsters.
Yeah, and we're not even talking, it's like super, super hyper small local maltsters. A lot of people think of Breese as a very large maltster, and Breese is actually relatively small. Great Western / Country Malt, they're only just now getting to the point where they're relatively big, but still they are like, tiny in comparison to someone like, who am I thinking, like Crisp or RAR. RAR is one of the biggest ones that spans America as well as some overseas companies. So even that, you're going to get some variance in those malts too.
They make malts that are no, I was trying to make a joke.
Rawr.
Rawr. I just want to be like rawr.
This whole topic came about because I've been seeing, even on the large scale, people with super systems in the brewing world, in the commercial brewing world, that have absolute consistency or as close to that as you can possibly get, still have variation in their mash efficiency or their overall efficiency. These are people with well-insulated mash tuns. They have grist hydration. They have mash rakes stirring their mash the exact right amount in the exact same time every single time they brew, and they can still get some pretty wide variations in mash efficiency.
And that's going to happen a lot to do with the malts. It can be impacted by the water as well. Your water will vary, especially around here, seasonally.
Yeah.
If you're on the other side of the river from us, which is weird because it's only like 2 miles, you're actually on a completely different water source. Yeah, and so that'll actually vary seasonally as well. But more so, your malts will vary. Every year they'll vary a little bit, and more so the smaller you get, the more variance you're more likely to have. Mostly because those smaller guys are going to be embracing that variance as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So things to think that can also affect it. You mentioned water chemistry. Things with your mill. If your mill has variance in gap sizes, which I was reading on the Pro Brewer Facebook page, that apparently even seasonal temperature variation can affect the expansion of your mill, which can give you small variations in the gap size.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
Or even just the size of the kernels going through. So there's other factors.
Probably not on your homebrew mill, but on a commercial scale, totally.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But we have a couple of pros and cons of the variations, or even just why maybe to lean into variation and malt variability. I'm saying varying a lot. Malt differences. And the first pro I'd just say is that there's a lot of new and strange flavors that you can lean into and say, all right, now I'm looking at malts through a completely different lens. They're not this consistent base. They're actually something to try to explore and experience new flavors out of. And so you can start expecting those new flavors or expecting some variation in flavors and look forward to those rather than being like, why didn't I make the same beer this time?
Yeah. So, and of course, the one downside, I guess, to embracing all these variances is that you won't be able to predict the outcome of your batches. And if you're on a 10-barrel system or 15-barrel system, this might end up being a bit of a pain in the butt for you because you don't know if that, hazy is going to end up being 6% or 7.5%. And that's going to be, end up, I think, coming down to trying to either adjust sort of I don't want to say post fermentation, but post runoff, I guess.
Yeah, adjusting when you can
to make sure that at least because your sugar content is pretty easy to adjust for. Generally, as a rule of thumb, you're going to shoot high and then you're going to water that down if you need to.
Yeah.
So if you do have inconsistencies, that's what you're going to do on a commercial scale. On a small scale like us, we just YOLO it. That's the beauty of not having a wide distribution. Is that we don't have like labeled things going out, or once you get to the label stuff, you have to actually be within a certain range on your alcohol content. That is a requirement. And so for us, we do all these one-off batches and we just say, yeah, that turned out really good. Regardless of efficiency or regardless of the slight deviation in the flavor profile that we might have been expecting in the first place.
Yeah, we actually love leaning into the uniqueness of each individual batch that we make, and we try to craft each individual batch with the potential variations of our malts in mind. If you've watched our malt series, which if you haven't, you should check that out. You've probably seen a number of times us mentioning just experimenting with the right variety of malts, including heritage malts and our local maltster, which is Link Malts, and they actually do all their malting like a stone's throw in that direction. So they're doing a lot of things on a small batch, getting the malt super locally, and it is a seasonal crop, which means that they're still playing around with how they're malting, and we love that. We lean into it. I mean, they create a lot of great flavors.
Yeah, exactly, and I think and that's sort of a give and take, especially with Link Malts, is that pretty much from the get go, we've had lower efficiencies, and that's just probably because of lower modification. In general, from the malt, but the trade-off of having a say 5% lower brew house efficiency or somewhere in that range is that you're going to end up with a lot of flavor from their malts. So we use their malts whenever we're really trying to get a nice unique punch of flavor, especially from their their lighter malts. A lot of times their base malts, we can use their base malts to supplement some more neutral base malt at a rate of 30 to 50%, and end up with a really, really nice unique flavor profile to a beer without overwhelming the rest of the beer. And it, just really offsets it from a lot of other stuff that we're getting around the area.
Yeah, one of our first early videos, I don't know, maybe like first 5 videos, was doing one with our Link Pilsner malt, which is the Baroness. It's Baroness is a local grain Pilsner, and compared to like a classic German Pilsner or even American Pilsner, it dropped out some of the graininess, some of the, mouthfeel that can come with graininess, and it added on like a nice creamy sweetness. And so it's just a unique experience and a phenomenal overall beer, just because we changed the base malt.
Yeah, exactly. And the funniest part of that is that we somehow managed to do an all grain batch using extract equipment when we brewed that. So yeah, all we had was a 5-gallon kettle and a little induction burner and like I think 1 or 2 5-gallon buckets that we somehow managed to sparge in. But yeah, that beer was just, for being a beer that I believe was like hardly 5%, if not even a little bit under, it was packed with tons and tons of flavor and honestly rivaled any commercial Pilsner from the Northwest that I've had. So
it was friggin' tasty.
It just goes to show, you don't always need a fancy system to make some really, really ridiculously good beer.
Yeah. So if you haven't already checked out our malt series, you should do that after you finish watching the rest of this live stream. You should also thumbs up our live stream if you haven't already. And let's go on to topic 2.
Topic number 2. Number 9.
And will this upcoming year? Were you gonna start? I got. Will this upcoming year be? Will this upcoming year be a good time to start a brewery? I know a lot of people that follow us do have pipe dreams of starting a brewery, especially those of you in America. And obviously, with everything
half our customers,
and obviously everything with everything getting hit really hard, it might not seem like the most opportune time.
So yeah, obviously things are taking a downturn for the economic cycle at this point in time, and so it might not seem the most intuitive thing is be like, yeah, totally a great time to start a business. However, the brewing industry has been growing so rapidly. There's been a lot of unexpected hurdles for people that have been starting up until this point. I think one of the biggest hurdles has actually been finding a spot to place a brewery and then finding equipment for that brewery.
Yeah, and finding that equipment on a timeline too.
Yeah, on a timeline, yeah. Basically like up until, probably like this month, if you wanted to buy used equipment, you were paying just as much, if not more, compared to new equipment. And if you wanted new equipment, you were going to wait a year for it. So that's sort of the situation that we've been in until, essentially right now. So
someone was just trying to look for a premise for a brewery. Sorry, I was reading through things.
Oh.
So what we do, at least, and I don't know if these are international sites. Some of them might be, but we look at things like probrewer.com, which has a classified section for used equipment. And I'm guessing within the next 3 months or so, depending on how the COVID government rollback works, that'll probably end up getting flooded with a lot of equipment. And so checking your classifieds for locations and for equipment is going to be important. So ProBrewer is a really cool tool that you can check out for new brew houses, fermentation tanks, and always make sure that you're going with the quality over necessarily some really ridiculously good price break.
Yes, that is a main factor, yeah. So ultimately the economic downturn is a double-edged sword because what it means is that unfortunately some breweries will be going out of business. But if you're looking to start up a brewery, it means that you might be able to get either their spot or their equipment on the cheap. So definitely keep an eye out for that as you are looking to build your brew house.
Yeah, even in our area, I know that there's a number of bars and restaurants that unfortunately have had to close permanently, which is sad. We always want to be supporting our local beer economy and our local restaurant economy. So you should do that if you can in your area too.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that is going to lead to some real estate that's open, and the overall cost of that real estate should theoretically drop in the next 6 months.
Yeah.
So.
While we're on the topic of equipment too, not to get too in depth with anything too specific, but one of the things we struggled with when we were starting our place here last year was actually cold storage and figuring out our walk-in solution. We looked at probably a dozen different options and at price points from $1,000 to $20,000, and that's kind of a tricky thing. But if you do have any restaurants that might be closing their doors around the area, a lot of them have these sort of modular or pre-built walk-ins that have, a compressor unit on them, and then they have these large panels that go in the walk-in, so they're freestanding. You can place them anywhere you want. You can build walls around them. You can do whatever you need to do for them. And if you can snag one of those on the cheap, that will put you in a very, very good situation for your cold storage, because that's probably one of the most overlooked pieces of equipment, I guess, when people go to start a brewery.
Yeah, and there's storage is something that you might have an idea of how much storage you need, but until you're actually trying to fit all your batches of kegs and everything in there, especially if you're going to try to use a bright tank in there, a lot of people are going to have to be storing their hops in that walk-in, or if there's any restaurant involved with the brewery as well. More cold storage is always better.
Yeah, I know our on-site storage here is actually only about 10 by 10, and when we were putting that in,
it seemed like plenty.
Yeah, I think we even had a conversation of like, that's a little bit bigger than we need, but that's probably better anyway. And yeah, once we start filling it up with kegs, it's like, yeah, we could have easily used 3 times this space.
Yeah.
It's one of those situations of you're never going to regret building a bigger walk-in than you think you need.
And the other nice thing about a really big walk-in too is, especially if you get one of those nice, they have metal panels and everything like that. They're super quality in terms of the refrigeration, but then they're also really easy to bore holes through if you're going to use that as your serving area as well.
Yeah. Matt Clow, do not be dissuaded by all this stuff going down. I think it's a great time to start a brewery. That's what we're telling you right now. And because the other thing is that people actually tend to change their beer choices. So as long as you're not trying to start, a very large distribution brewery right now, I think you're actually still sitting in a very good situation. Someplace like here, someplace that you have on site, or you have some form of direct, what am I thinking
to
of?
Consumer, to end consumer.
So basically you have a tap room, you can sell beer by the pint. I think you're actually going to be really well off, because what's going to be hit the hardest are the big guys that are trying to distro. And we've actually been on a trend for the last couple years of eat local, drink local, right?
Absolutely.
At least here in the Northwest. I don't know how it is the rest of the country. I'm assuming
I think that trend is kind of spreading. So
yeah, I'm assuming it's slowly following suit. But what we're probably going to see is, yes, there's going to be a slight decline in overall people going out. But I think those people going out are going to be looking for those smaller local spots to spend their money. And as a result, the spots that are getting, like we're in Spokane, Washington, for instance. So you got Seattle on the other side of the state that has some awesome breweries. We got Oregon that's got some awesome breweries. But we also have Spokane that has a ton of awesome breweries. So people might be more likely to say, hey, let's buy a pint of beer from Spokane instead of buying, a pint of beer from, Eugene, Oregon or something like that, right?
It's a great time to be a neighborhood brewery. If you have a lot of walking traffic or driving traffic near you, obviously not right now, but in like 4 or 5 months, especially if there's going to be some bars or restaurants that are shutting down that you can open up as a tap room, it'll be a great time to find a spot that a lot of people want to visit. I think chain restaurants actually might be the ones that get hit quite a bit too.
Yeah, I definitely think the chains are gonna be hurting. For sure, but yeah, and that's ultimately just because they're getting distributed kegs and stuff. So if you can sell in house, you'll be all right. The beauty of that is that your margins are way higher. Honestly, anything below, in my opinion, probably a 30-barrel system, you're really gonna be working hard and pushing some tight margins to do anything kind of distro on. So yeah, I honestly at this point like five-ish barrel system. Maybe 10 if you got a lot of traffic in your area, and just shoot for selling as much beer in-house as you can.
Absolutely. So the bottom line at the end of all this, I think, is if you're looking at opening soon, keep an eye out on places like LoopNet for locations, places like Pro Brewer or any sort of classifieds, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, all those for used equipment that you might be needing. And that's the bottom line there. So let's go on to some questions that we've seen.
Bam. So I'm going to go ahead and try to address a question. Hopefully the person's still watching from earlier when we were talking about our wheat wine. I saw one pop up, and they were talking about or asking about water profiles for the wheat wine. And you could go a few different ways. I think this one's pretty open, but if I were to do it, I would, I think they were specifically asking about chloride, and I think I would actually up my chloride just a little bit compared to my sulfate ratio to really soften that and just make it an overall easy drinking beer.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I probably would keep it relatively balanced, so you might end up with like no more than like 2 to 1 chloride to sulfate. I'd probably keep it in the, if chloride is 30 to 40 ppm, sulfates might be like 20 to 30 ppm.
Yeah, you said 2 to 1, right?
Yeah.
That sounds about right. I wouldn't get anything too carried away. We're not making like a New England style hazy or anything like that. So, but yeah, at the same time, it might be a little bit too aggressive to do a West Coast style where you're at like 4 to 5 to 1 of sulfate to chloride. So yeah, keep it pretty balanced. Ultimately, is what we would recommend.
Someone's just starting their own brewery tap room with a 150-liter boiler. Will only be barreling and serving in-house. Other than the boiler and the fermenters, what else might I be needing? If you're only barreling, I think the one thing that is a great tool to have is a blending tank or a blending system. A lot of times what that looks like is basically 4 bright tanks that are kind of stacked on each other. And so if you go out of the barrels and into the bright tanks, you can kind of work on blending from those.
Yeah. So that would be good. An oversized glycol chiller, just because that's an issue that we run into. We at this point we have quite literally 3 glycol chillers at our brewery,
yes.
And it would be very nice to be able to do away with those, plumb in a nice, efficient, oversized, overpowered system, and then go from there and not have 3 chillers actually in our brew house just taking up room unnecessarily.
Yeah.
So. Downside to those is they're actually not too bad. They're for a brand new system, for something that would run, say, a 5-barrel brewery. You're looking at in the range of about, I think, $10 to $15 $10
to $15. Yep.
Plus a few zeros on those, $10,000 to $15,000 to get set up there. So.
And then you can build it as modular as you want. So you can
Yep.
be plumbing it in to go into any tank, and it just kind of clears up some mess on the inside and makes it so that you're not overheating your inside.
Yeah, and there is one nice thing about having a very oversized system, which you might end up spending an extra $5,000 on, is that you can actually do either a 2-stage chilling method, or you can actually have what's called a cold liquor tank, which means you're going to use that glycol to actually chill water in a storage tank. You can chill that water down to 35 degrees, which means then you can do single pass chilling. So you might be able to transfer a 5-barrel batch in a matter of like 20 minutes, opposed to, what does it take us, the better part of an hour downtown?
Yeah.
So that's something that, yes, it's going to be one of those upfront investments that ends up paying itself back in the amount of time that you have to spend in the brew house.
Someone's saying that actually during lockdown, the licensing for opening up their brewery and the financing and everything like that has been going faster. So that's another maybe a little benefit.
Yeah, I can
don't know
actually
if that's
see
universal,
that.
but
yeah, probably that might be a state to state thing, but
yeah,
I can definitely see that. I know Idaho is kind of the opposite right now. I guess all of the businesses in Idaho have to like reapply for their liquor licenses. And then, or maybe it's just through health board. They have to reapply for a health license and then get inspected before they can open back up.
Yeah.
Which is kind of going to be a pain in the butt. Hopefully they got a way to expedite that process, but.
I like expedite. Making up words is fun.
Yeah.
Do we contract brew? And if so, do we notice a drop in that? We don't contract brew for other people actually, but we do sometimes do our own contracting on other people's systems. Definitely a huge drop in all that. Contract brewing right now is not a terrible idea. Especially if you open up for a distro brewery, because it's going to be really hard to distro right now. Just in today's climate, it's kind of hard to get into distro. But contract brewing is actually a relatively good business model if you already have the system, because then you can kind of offload some of the marketing and branding requirements to kind of meet your bottom line. And then just focus on the beer that you can get out, and then have other people try to sell the beer that you couldn't.
So we got a few other ones after that. So somebody's asking about pH drops. and adjusting pH before or after we mash in. Generally, we'll try to incorporate that. I think we've actually answered this before, but we try to incorporate that into our water salts and also into the grains we're using. Acid malt is always our friend, so I would say before is our general rule of thumb, unless we're doing like a kettle sour or something like that. So.
Someone's asking if we can suggest a glycol chiller. The biggest one that we have is a UBC group one, but that said, we don't have a...
Yeah. There actually, I would recommend looking local. I think there's a lot of companies around, well, local-ish, around the nation that will make really, really good quality glycol chillers. So if they're a decent company, I know you should be able to get a hold of them. I know I got a hold of one not too long ago, and they actually should be able to talk with you. You should be able to get a hold of them on the phone, figure out what kind of system you're trying to put together, and actually recommend a chiller for your specific use. So try to actually keep that in the U.S. There's a ton of companies, from what I know of, that actually build glycol chillers here in the U.S.
Adam Lowry's asking if he puts his spunding valve at 0 psi, does it need a blow-off tube? Probably. It's going to depend on how much you actually expect blow off. So obviously the spunding valve will act as your airlock. But that said, I don't know how well they work at exactly 0. I would actually probably set mine to just a little bit higher, like 1 or 2 psi, just to make sure that you're getting some sealing in there.
Depends on if you're going to have blow off or not. Ultimately, I mean, if it's at 0, you might as well just take it off and put a blow off tube on if that's possible. Just because at that point you're not really spunding. And what we'll actually we do that here, as a matter of fact. So for the most part, we will throw on a blow off tube on our fermenters during that really vigorous few days of fermentation. Day 4 or 5, generally, when we start seeing that fermentation calm down, we're not blowing off anymore. That's the point where we're actually we're using tri-close. So might be different at home, but that's the point where we'd usually take off our blow-off tube and then apply our spunding valve and then crank that up and then let the beer spund at that point. So
I would say I forgot. I was going to say something, then I forgot what it was.
You never.
Oh, if you're doing like a wheat beer and you're using German ale yeast, it's probably a better idea to just err on the side of having the blow-off tube, especially if you're anywhere close to the top of your fermenter. For a lot of beers that, if you're not used to blow-off, you probably don't need to worry too much about it. Just put the spunding valve at a low psi. But the difference between 0 and 1 to 2 psi really isn't going to make a huge difference. It's when you start actually like doing pressure ferments.
Yeah, 10 to 15 is when things start changing up a little bit for you. Best way to add vanilla?
Right now, the best way to add vanilla is with extract, like really nice quality extract. We get ours from benilla.com.
That's the easiest way for sure.
But vanilla beans right now, unless you're using a lot of them, they are really expensive. A few years ago, we actually used to carry vanilla beans because we can get them at a reasonable price, but there was some sort of blight, I think, like 2 or 3 years ago that destroyed a lot of crops.
I looked into that.
What was it?
There is I think it's a Chinese, it's like, I want to call it a cartel. Basically, the Chinese bought them all up and they froze them, and then they're playing the market essentially.
Huh.
It's really weird either way. I saw a whole documentary on it. I was like, that explains why the price of vanilla seeds or beans jumped by like 4. And they are not all created equal. So definitely do your research if you do plan on buying some vanilla beans. Like Peter said, you might end up spending like $15 or $20 per bean, which is not cheap, but it's probably going to be worth it compared to buying some poor dried up little shriveled bean from a less reputable dealer.
Go to benilla.com. They've got a number of different vanilla extracts and vanilla beans if you want to get those, and for a relatively reasonable price.
Yep. Making tinctures is another way to add them. I've done them with tinctures before. It definitely comes across as a little bit sharper. You get more bite and you don't get as much sweetness, I've noticed, from the tinctures, compared to kind of doing them low and slow. Is the other way to do it, is just throwing them straight into your fermenter and or conditioning vessel and letting them sit for probably at least a month or 2 to really try to extract some of those flavors.
Someone's busting out their anvil today. Awesome.
Yeah.
Take an Instagram video and tag us in it.
Instagram video. Hey, I should have posted a picture of our kettle on Instagram. Speaking of Oh yeah, we totally forgot about that. Peter bought a fancy electric kettle that we're going to use as a hot liquor tank, a big old 50-gallon brew belt.
Yeah.
So I got that wired up yesterday.
We'll have
and
plenty of hot water for days now.
For days, son. Yeah, so it's got one of the ones with like the weird elements. It's got a big old 30 amp element in the bottom of it. And yeah, so that'll be fun to play with.
Unrelated, we may have a used 18-gallon Digiboil set for 3-phase available if anyone locally wants to buy a giant hot water heater.
I don't think it's set for 3-phase.
Or not for 3-phase, sorry,
Yeah.
220.
I was like, we don't have 3-phase here.
Yeah, no, it's set for 3-phase. It's it'll really heat that 18 gallons of water hella fast.
Peter's really smart with a lot of things. Electricity is not one of those.
I know what 3-phase is, though. I just sometimes don't think before I use words.
It would have been nice to have 3-phase here.
What's the advice you can give to turning a local homebrew supply into a split brewery store like you guys did? If you're already a homebrew supply, I think it's a good option. What we had to do is verticalize our inventory as much as possible. So a lot of things had to go into backstock. Our display is very minimal because taproom space is the most valuable space you have.
Yeah.
So as much as you can backstock and verticalize and just display what you think is going to be snazzy for people to buy, the better.
And I think you got to you need to base that off of the population of the town you're in too. I know I had a conversation, a while ago now, with one guy that wanted to open up something similar to what we were doing in a town of that had a population of like 10 or 15,000 was all. And like I don't want to like kill your vibe there, but that I can just guarantee you that won't work. I would say try to shoot with a town that's got a population, if you don't have a homebrew shop, of probably around that 100 to 150,000 mark. And I think if you don't have a homebrew shop there, then it would be very viable, especially if there's also a niche for a small brewery there. So.
Yeah. That said, it's very, very hard to be in the homebrew supplies market right now.
Yeah.
Most things are being bought online, and you really got to lean into things that you need expertise on to be able to buy. So grains are really easy to sell, but you don't make a lot of money on grains. Things like kegerators right now are going pretty well for us, just because a lot of people that want to set up kegerators don't necessarily have the setting up kegerators knowledge, and so having someone that can walk you through, either building or just buying a new kegerator seems to be that's value added that we have.
Yep. And that is the reality, is that all the big purchases tend to go online these days. And while it is nice to have, especially during times like these that we're only selling about a third of the beer that we otherwise would be, it's a really nice buffer for us. But at the same time, once we get reopened, it's definitely not going to make up the majority of our sales.
If you could travel to any country in the world at this moment, right now, where would you go? I
don't know.
Logan's like Antarctica. I just want to get away from everybody.
I can be there in 3 hours.
Nice, yeah. Turn right back around. For me, it's probably somewhere in Europe.
Probably more like 2 hours.
I don't know.
You don't know?
Maybe Egypt.
Actually, I've always wanted to go to New Zealand.
Yeah. Play a little Lord of the Rings.
I was just going to go like fishing and hang out, but...
Yeah. I'll probably, instead of going somewhere for the actual location of where it is, I'd probably go somewhere where like I'd want to meet the people there, like I'd want to visit somebody. So I'd probably have to do with more the U.S. Maybe Greece. Greece sounds like a good one.
Matt's trying to pull out our heartstrings.
But yeah, I think it's probably have to do with people that I want to see, maybe breweries that I want to see more so than the actual location.
Yeah, New Zealand they do things differently down there. It's very interesting to me.
I do like that idea.
I can mesh with the vibe of New Zealand.
All right.
We got one last question here. Is there a website that has co-op brewing listed
listings
for Sea Brewing? I'm not sure.
Yeah, not that I know of. I know Northwest had a big system for that, where it was basically a giant co-op for a while, and then they turned into more contract after that. But yeah. I don't know too much about looking into their business model.
Yeah, and I know there's a few. I think they're talking about like kind of like what the incubator is. Is that kind of what they're doing?
Maybe.
Yeah. That. All right. Sorry, we couldn't really answer that question.
Yeah. Was heading to the knitting factory at the end of February, but couldn't work it out. Flights from UK. Wow, that'd be awesome.
For the knitting factory? Okay. that's a long flight to go see a concert.
I support it though. The knitting factor is walking distance from my downtown business, the Steel Barrel. So
hey,
I
there you
support
go.
it.
Yeah. If you ever do make it there, definitely make sure to check out the Steel Barrel Tap Room.
Yeah, they were talking about incubator, but incubators are super state specific in America. I know the laws that we had to go through to establish our incubator downtown were crazy different than the laws you'd have to do even in Oregon or Idaho.
Lots of hoops to jump through. Yeah, I'm glad I didn't get into that. I thought about it at one point when you guys were setting it up, and then I started seeing all of the headaches. I was like, yeah, no, that just sounds like a bad idea.
Yeah. So yeah, anyways, we're almost up to 100 viewers watching live right now. That is super awesome, but it looks like we're almost out of questions/time. So if everyone that's watching can please like the video, because it's at 21 likes, and if 99 more people hit like, then we'll be at like 1 million, because I can math.
Yeah. And make sure to tune in next Sunday at 8:45 a.m. I almost said p.m.
a.m. specific standard time.
Specifics. Yeah, so might be a little bit later if you're in other parts of the world. Hell, it's probably afternoon, evening time if you're over in Europe. So
yeah, I think somebody said that they're in Norway or something like that, and they're just cooking dinner right now.
Yeah, that explains why we get a lot of people from Europe, actually.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you for tuning in to this live stream. We will see you again next week, and please like, subscribe. We'll be trying to put out about 3 videos actually, including live stream every week from now on out.
Yeah.
And we will see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe as always, and never feel afraid to throw on any video suggestions that you would like us to make, because we are working hard to pump them out for you. All right. Bye, everyone. You ending it?